The sea was calm when he left. On an autumn morning in 1107, a young king stood at the prow of a longship as it drifted from the cold docks of southwest Norway. He was 17, wrapped in a heavy cloak, his expression unreadable. The fjord stretched before him, quiet beneath the pale morning light, and behind him the mountain shadows of a kingdom he would not see again for nearly 4 years. He did not speak, not then. The rowers dipped their oars into the water with mechanical rhythm, and the carved serpent at the prow cut cleanly through the current. The fleet behind him moved as a single body, sails furled, crews at the ready. He brought with him 60 ships and thousands of men. His name was Sigurd Magnusson, King of Norway, and no other Scandinavian monarch before or after him would sail so far, fight so often, or return with such certainty of victory. His destination was Jerusalem. His purpose was God. His methods, however, bore all the marks of the world he came from, a world of axes and oaths, of sea battles and blood debts, where men still carved their stories into stone. To understand Sigurd's expedition is to understand a moment of strange transition in European history. The Viking Age had officially ended more than a generation earlier, its raids and conquests brought to a close by the Christianization of Scandinavia and the centralization of royal authority. But cultural shifts do not occur cleanly, nor do they respect the boundaries drawn by historians. In the early 12th century, Norway remained a place of coastal villages and clan allegiances, where ancient sagas were still spoken in fire-lit halls and oaths were remembered longer than treaties. Christianity had taken hold, formally at least. Churches had risen where there were once sacred groves, and crosses marked graves that might previously have held ship burials. But beneath the veneer of Latin liturgy and royal anointings, the older ways lingered. The reverence for strength, the glorification of war, the belief that the deeds of a man echoed louder than his prayers. Sigurd was born into this tension. He had been baptized, taught by clerics, and crowned with the blessings of Rome. But he was also the son of Magnus Barefoot, a warrior king whose final campaign had ended with his body riddled by Irish spears. From his father, Sigurd inherited not only the crown, but also the impulse to go, to sail, to conquer, to be remembered. His journey began in earnest with the assembling of the fleet, 60 dragon-prowed longships outfitted for war and pilgrimage alike. It was not a crusade in the official sense. Pope Urban II's call to arms had gone out over a decade earlier, and most of Europe's great lords had already marched or died in the First Crusade. Jerusalem had been taken, a Latin kingdom established. But for those on the northern edges of Christendom, the Holy Land remained both a sacred obligation and a tantalizing stage. Sigurd's expedition was a private crusade, unbound by papal planning, but fueled by religious purpose, and by the allure of testing steel on foreign soil. The voyage southward was slow and difficult. Storms battered the ships in the North Sea. Supply lines grew thin, yet the fleet pressed on, hugging the coastlines of England and France, eventually arriving in the Iberian Peninsula, where Sigurd found his first taste of battle. Along the western coast of what is now Portugal, near the fortress city of Sintra, Sigurd's fleet encountered Muslim forces occupying a strategic position near the shoreline. What began as a skirmish quickly grew into a full engagement. Sigurd, still barely more than a teenager, led his warriors ashore, directing the fight with the calm of someone raised among battle-hardened men. The chronicles are sparse on detail but unanimous in the outcome. The enemy forces were routed. According to later accounts, the victory was so complete that Sigurd's men sang of it well into their next port. The Christian Portuguese rulers of the region, locked in their own generations-long struggle against the Moors, welcomed the Norwegians as allies, offering supplies and passage. But Sigurd did not linger. The fighting had been necessary, even welcomed, but it was not his final destination. Further south, off the coast of the Balearic Islands, the Norwegian fleet encountered a stronghold of Muslim pirates who had long plagued Christian merchants in the western Mediterranean. Sigurd ordered an assault on the island of Formentera, where a fortified cave served as a base for corsairs. The landing was perilous. Archers rained fire from the cliffs above, and the Norwegians were forced to scale rocky faces under cover of night. But once the position was breached, the defenders collapsed in confusion. By morning, the stronghold had been taken. Here again, the sources offer few tactical details and instead focus on outcome. Sigurd's men took the fortress, seized treasure, and rescued Christian captives. It was the kind of battle that might have felt more familiar to his father than to his priests, but it was celebrated all the same. Sigurd was not just a pilgrim, he was a war leader. In the old Norse mould, a Christian in cross and banner, but unmistakably Viking in bearing. When the fleet finally reached the Holy Land, it was met with a kind of wary reverence. The Kingdom of Jerusalem, barely a decade old, was still precariously held by its Frankish rulers. King Baldwin I, beset by rival Muslim dynasties and internal disorder, received Sigurd with open arms. A formal procession was held, and the young Norwegian was granted the honor of riding to the River Jordan under royal escort. There he bathed in the sacred water, a symbolic act of purification and fulfillment, and knelt before the stone walls of Jerusalem. For a moment the pilgrimage was complete, but Sigurd did not return home immediately. Instead, he remained in the east for months, accompanying Baldwin on several expeditions, including a campaign into Sidon that resulted in the capture of the coastal city. Sigurd's warriors, seasoned now by 2 years of campaigning, formed the shock troops in several engagements, breaking defensive lines and seizing strong points with the same disciplined aggression they had honed in the fjords. Their king, ever at the front, fought with a zeal that impressed even the hardened knights of the Latin East. He did not lose a single battle. More than that, he never even came close. This streak of unbroken victory is perhaps the most extraordinary feature of Sigurd's career. While many crusaders gained reputations through martyrdom or strategic blunders, redeemed by divine intervention, Sigurd's record was clean and uncompromised. He arrived, he fought, he won. Whether through careful planning, numerical advantage, or sheer force of personality, he led a 4-year military expedition across hostile waters and foreign continents without suffering defeat. The feat is made more remarkable by his age. He was still in his early 20s by the time the campaign ended, and by the variety of enemies faced. Muslim defenders in Iberia and the Levant, pirates in the Mediterranean, and the ever-present threats of mutiny, disease, and storm. That he returned home not only victorious, but alive, places him in rare company among medieval warrior kings. When Sigurd finally turned his fleet northward, he took with him not just treasure and relics, but also a tangible symbol of divine favor. Baldwin presented him with a splinter of the true cross, the most sacred relic in Christendom, and gave him ships and horses for the overland journey through Byzantium and the Holy Roman Empire. Sigurd's passage through Constantinople was marked by ceremony. He met with Emperor Alexios I, exchanged gifts, and became the subject of courtly admiration. The Norwegians passed through Hungary, Austria, and the German lands, often greeted as honoured guests. The longships, too cumbersome for the rivers, were abandoned in the Mediterranean. From there, Sigurd and his remaining company travelled on horseback, escorted at intervals by local lords eager to host a victorious king. His return to Norway in 1111 was triumphant but subdued. 4 years had passed. His younger brothers had grown into rivals, and the kingdom he left behind had not remained frozen in his absence. Yet his arrival carried the weight of myth. No one questioned his right to rule. He had gone farther than any Norwegian before him, fought in more battles than most men would see in a lifetime, and returned undefeated. The title by which history would remember him, Sigurd the Crusader, was not a poetic flourish. It was fact, earned by iron and salt, carried home across mountains and sea. But the story does not end neatly. Sigurd's later reign was marked by tensions common to medieval kingship. Disputes over succession, local rebellions, strained alliances. The clarity and unity of purpose that had defined his crusade began to fragment. The very traits that had made him a successful war leader, directness, resolve, a certain disregard for compromise, proved less effective in the long, grinding politics of domestic rule. He governed until 1130, nearly 2 decades after his return, and died of illness at the age of 40. Upon his death, Norway descended into a civil war that would last for generations. The relic of the true cross he had brought home disappeared in the chaos, lost like so many symbols of a past that no longer fit the moment. Yet the image of Sigurd remains. The young king on the longship, the Christian warrior in a land of Vikings, the boy who went to Jerusalem and came back undefeated. His life, shaped by the collision of old and new, faith and ambition, lingers at the edge of legend, one foot in the sagas, the other in the chronicles. In a time when most men were broken by the journey, Sigurd crossed continents and returned unscarred. Whatever else might be said of him, he did what few ever dared.